Hi, sixth graders. So last week we took our test on rates, ratios, and proportions. And today we are starting a new chapter on fractions, decimals, and percents. So we are starting chapter 2. We're starting on page 89. So if you are following along, you happen to have your math book at home, you can follow along in your book. If you don't have your math book at home, you can follow along with the pages on Canvas. We scanned them and they are up for you. You do not need to print them though. You can just write it on a separate piece of paper as long as you make sure that you number your problems and box your answers so that I can see what you've done. So let's take a look at what we are doing today. So our real world link today says the instruments below show the part of students in the school orchestra that play each type of instrument. So brass instruments, or trumpets, is 0 and 25 hundredths. So in word form, we would just write 25 hundredths. Remember, when we're talking about decimals, we're not talking hundreds, we're talking hundredths with the TH at the end. And as a fraction, 25 hundredths would be the same as 25 over 100. Notice how this number, the denominator, is the same as this number. So next one, the percussion instruments, so that's like the drums, is 15 hundredths. In word form, we would just write out 15 hundredths. And to write it as a fraction, be 15 over 100. For strings like violins, it's 31 hundredths. In word form, just like before, we'll write out 31 hundredths. And you guessed it, to write it as a fraction, we would just write 31 over 100. Finally, the woodwind instruments, that is 29 hundredths. In word form, we write out again 29 hundredths. And as a fraction, 29 over 100. So every single decimal number we can write as a fraction. And that's what we are going to be talking about today. So we'll turn the page and go to page 90. So we are going to look at page 90 first. So writing decimals as fractions and mixed numbers. Decimals like 25 hundredths, 15 hundredths, 31 hundredths, and 29 hundredths can be written as fractions with denominators, or the numbers on the bottom, of 10, 100, 1,000, and so on. Any number that can be written as a fraction is called a rational number. Decimals like 3 and 25 hundredths, 26 and 82 hundredths, and 125 and 54 hundredths can be written as mixed numbers in simplest form. So we're going to practice that. So if we look at example number 1, we're writing each decimal as a fraction in simplest form. So that means that it cannot be reduced any further than it already has been. So first we're looking at 6 tenths. So if we use our place value chart, we can see that we have 6 tenths. We can write it 6 over 10, but that's not in simplest form. We can simplify by dividing the numerator, the top number, and the denominator, the bottom number, by the greatest common factor of the two of them. 3 over 5 is our final answer. Number 2, 45 hundredths. We would say 45 hundredths, and then we can simplify. We can divide it. So we can divide each one by 5, which is the greatest common factor of both of the numbers. And our final answer would be 9/20. In number 3, we have 375 thousandths. We can simplify it to 3/8. So if we look at A, B, and C, A, we can write 8/10 as 8/10, but that's not simplest form. We can divide by the greatest common factor, in this case is 2, to get 4/5. So 8/10 in fraction form in its simplest form is 4/5. B, 28 hundredths. If we keep dividing it now, I'm going to do this a little bit the long way. I'm going to divide it by 2, which gives me 14/50, but that's still not simplest form. So I can divide 14/50 again by 2 to get 7/25. 7/25 is my final answer. 7 is a prime number and does not divide evenly into 25. So that means that 28 hundredths in its simplest fraction form is 7/25. And then we have 125 thousandths. So I know right away that one of the factors is going to be 5. So I can divide by 5. And I know that 125 divided by 5 is going to give me my my numerator. And I can divide by 5 to get my denominator. Let's look at the next example. It says the average length of a conch shell is 9 8/85 inches. Express 9 8/85 as a mixed number in simplest form. So remember, a mixed number is a whole number and a fraction. So 9 8/85, we would write it in fraction form exactly how we're saying it, 9 8/85. And then we would reduce to 9 17/20. So our next question, it takes approximately 4 65 quarts of milk to make a pound of cheese. Express this amount as a mixed number in simplest form. So I know that 4 65 written as a mixed number is 4/65/100. And then I can divide it by 5 because I know that these two have factors of 5, which would give me 4. I'm going to work this out. So I know that I can do 65 divided by 5. 5 goes into 6 one time. And then I subtract and I bring down. 5 goes into 15 3 times. And that is evenly. So I know that 65 divided by 5 is 13. Now if I'm not sure and I want to check, I can do the same thing with 100. 5 can't go into 1. 5 goes into 10 2 times. Bring down the 0, and it's still a 0. So that means 4 65 expressed as a mixed number in simplest form is 4 13/20. Our next section is writing fractions and mixed numbers as decimals. For fractions with denominators that are factors of 10, 100, or 1,000, we can write equivalent fractions with these denominators. So we're going to start with writing 9/12 as a decimal. So there's two different ways we can do this. We can change it into an equivalent fraction that is a factor of 10, 100, or 1,000, or we can divide the numerator by the denominator. So in the first method, 9/12, if we divide it by 3, gives us 3/4. 4 is a factor of 100. So we take that 3/4 and multiply it by 25 to give us 75 hundredths. So that means that 9/12 as a decimal is 75 hundredths. Or we can divide the numerator by the denominator. So that means that we would write it like this. We would divide it all out using long division and get the same answer, 75 hundredths. So let's look at E, 3/5. So I know right away that 5 is a factor of 10. So I'm not going to worry about using the second method right now. So I know that if I multiply all of this by 2, I know that my denominator will be 10, and I know that 3 times 2 is 6, which means that 3/5 in decimal form is 6/10. For F, 14/25, I know that 25 times 4 is going to give me 100 as a denominator. And I can do 14 times 4 to get my numerator. I'm going to work that out over on the side. 14 times 4. 4 times 4 is 16. 4 times 1 is 4, plus 1 more is 5. So that means that 14/25 in decimal form is 56 hundredths. And then G, 102 250ths. Ugh, right? That one's a little bit tricky. So that one you can decide. You can use equivalent fractions or you can divide. I'm going to try dividing just for fun. So I'm going to work that one out over here on the side. So I'm going to divide the the top number by the bottom number. So that means 250 into 102. And I know that I'm going to need some more. So I'm going to add my decimal point now and add some zeros. 250 can't go into 1 or 2 or into 102, but I know it can go into 1020. So 250 will go into 1020 about 4 times. So if I check that, 250 times 4, I'm going to get 1,000. And I subtract, and I get 20. And I bring down my 0. 250 can't go into 200. So I have to add another 0 and bring that one down. 250 will go into 2,000. I know it'll go into 1,000 4 times. So to go into 2,000, it'll be 8 times. So that means that 102 250ths in its smallest decimal form is 408 thousandths. I know that's a little bit tricky, but it is okay. You will get the hang of it. And we'll look at the last example together. It says a caterpillar can have as many as 4,000 muscles compared to humans who have about 600. Write the length of the caterpillar as a decimal. So it'll show you all of the steps. So definition of a mixed number, whole number, and a fraction. And we multiply the numerator by the denominator. Multiply the numerator and the denominator by 125, and we read it as 1 375 thousandths. So that means that the length of a caterpillar is about 1 375 thousandths inches. Sorry, I'm getting tripped over my words. So, do your best. I know this is a little bit tricky, so please, please, please email me if you have any questions. I am happy to help. And let me know if there's anything that I can do for you. Have a fantastic rest of your day, 6th graders.